Okay, hello everyone. My name is Sophia Seung-yoon Lee. I'm based at Chung-Ang University. I was going to say Chung-Ang Women's University, but it's Chung-Ang University in Korea. Very nice to meet you all. And this session is a special session. It's a book manuscript workshop. So it's it may be intensive. We have 3 presenters who are all co-authors of this book, and 8 distinguished discussants. And we talked about how to run this session. And I suggest that we start with about 15-minute presentation of the manuscript. And also there's a manuscript that Professor Yu printed out here who haven't had a chance to take a look before. So it's right here. It's their hard copy. It's not a full manuscript, obviously, brief summary. And after 15 minutes of presentation, we'll first go around and have some short comments or questions, and then the authors respond, and then we'll open to the floor and also other discussants, and we'll try to have a workshop and also like a seminar. It will be back and forth. Just please remember to use the microphone because there's also online participants. Okay, so we'll start the session from now. Please give warm hands to Professor Yu Jong-sung.
So let me introduce my co-authors, Professor Kang Hoon at Hanshin University, officially retired like me, and Professor Seung-yoon Lee at Daegu University. And I'm Jong-sung at Gachon University, and we 3, and actually Professor Sophia Seung-yoon Lee as well. We are all members of Korea Inequality Research Laboratory at Gachon University. So this is one of the book projects sponsored by the Inequality Research Lab. And so original idea was just not making presentation and to get feedback from the designated discussants. Because this is a very early stage of rough, incomplete draft. But to accommodate the participants who are not given the manuscript, as well as also for the designated discussants, because there is a very short time to read the draft. So I will give a very brief presentation, probably, hopefully less than 10 minutes. So, as the title of the book says, this is the title of the book is A Feasible Basic Income in Korea, or for Korea, which is better, I don't know, to promote freedom, equality, and sustainable efficiency. So let me start with our objectives. Freedom, equality. You are all familiar with that. So by sustainable efficiency, we mean 3 things. First, economically sustainable efficiency. So in the social welfare literature, they emphasize target efficiency. So with the given budget, how to use the budget efficiently to target those poor people with means test. So put the resources to them. That's the most efficient way of reducing poverty. But that may be efficient immediately in the short run, but it creates deadweight loss, and also the budget required for the plan increases over time, because those recipients of the benefits find, even if they reduce their work, they can get the they can have the same final income. At some times, by reducing work or not working, their final income or disposable income can be more even higher. So that creates perverse incentives, and so in the long run, increasing budget, reduced labor supply, and decline of GDP growth. This is economically unsustainable, and also it restricts the freedom to improve one's situation through work. So and also we mean ecologically sustainable. So carbon tax and the carbon dividend basic income is one important component of our plan, and demographically sustainable. This is particularly important for Korea because last year the total fertility rate was 0.78, less than 1. The only OECD country less than 1, and less than half the average of So in order to maintain the population, we need a 2.1 fertility rate. So Korea is, if this trend continues, Korea will disappear. So Korean population began to decline since 2020, and many rural municipalities are real in the risks of extinction. So, and then we plan to propose a feasible plan. By feasibility, we mean financial feasibility. So financial feasibility, some proponents of basic income argue we do not necessarily need a fiscally neutral plan. So based on MMT theory and those kind of things, but we propose fiscally neutral plan. So there will be no fiscal deficit. And actually, one could say it's a violation of unconditionality principle, but we have one conditionality. So the right to basic income requires a duty to pay taxes. So when you have no income, you pay no tax, you just get the benefits. But the next year, if you earn income, if you are inherited some wealth, then you have to pay taxes. Otherwise, if you just claim basic income without paying taxes, that system cannot be sustainable. So a duty to pay taxes is a requirement for the right to basic income. This satisfies the principle of reciprocity. And it should be politically feasible. So we came to find the cold reality of the popular support for basic income declined ahead of a presidential election. So, and then we found that it is a very hard sell. The UBI is a very hard sell. So we find that it may be easier to sell the idea of differential benefits according to income rather than UBI with flat tax or progressive tax. So it was difficult to explain to many people why Lee Jae-yong, Lee, the rich people should get UBI. So, and even Harvard students have difficulty in understanding the idea of a basic income. When Gregory Menke asked his students, which would you prefer, a basic income plan or negative income tax plan that have equivalent distributional outcomes without calling the plans UBI or negative income tax? He just described the plans. And then 90% of Harvard undergrads chose an NIT plan over a basic income plan. So that may mean at least initially, it may be easier to explain people and persuade the people. We give differential benefits according to income up to a certain level. And Professor Seung-yoon, one of her research found from the European Social Survey, the popular support is not based on unconditionality of the UBI. Those people who are concerned about inequality, they were supporters of UBI. So these kind of things, perhaps we may pursue a negative income tax type of basic income, might be a politically feasible strategy, at least initially. Secondly, and the United States invented earned income tax credit when the discussion on negative income tax was unfruitful in the early 1970s. And then the program became very popular in the United States and also in other countries. It was exported to other countries. And Korea introduced EITC starting in 2008. And recently there is a proposal to make EITC more like a UBI. So EITC is on a family basis. So let's make it on an individual basis. EITC phases out if your income rises. Let's remove the phase out. So it makes it universal, at least among working people. And Korea and Japan, and as far as I know, have the very generous employee income deduction. So, but the employee income deduction, like other deductions, are regressive, highly regressive. The size is very large and regressive. So compared to the budget for EITC, for working poor, the tax reduction, the foregone tax revenue because of employee income deduction is much greater. I think it's 5 times or more greater than the EITC budget. So initial idea was for Professor Kang and me as well. We proposed replacing the employee income deduction with the universal basic income. And then people criticized why working people should subsidize their benefits should go to those people not working. So, so it is a kind of a compromise. So before reaching to universal basic income, as an intermediate step, we may make it universal earned income credit on an individual basis. So those high earning people, their tax reduction will be reduced. But low income people, their benefit will go up. That's the idea of universal EITC. And also, yeah, Commonwealth dividends basic income will be financed by carbon tax for ecological sustainability and land value tax or land holding tax for economic efficiency. And also from other commons. And we introduce effective tax rate, participation tax rate, and effective marginal tax rate as the analytical tool for this work project. So effective tax rate is for equality. So to enhance equality, we need to have progressive effective tax rate, which incorporates both taxes and transfers or benefits. So including taxes and transfers for low-income people, effective tax rate should be negative. So with a very minimal income, effective tax rate should be very highly negative, and then it converges to zero as your income rises. And if your income rises more than the average, then your tax rate, effective tax rate, will become positive and increasingly increasing. That's the effective tax rate. So one test is effective tax rate, whether it is really enhancing inequality. And secondly, participation tax rates and effective marginal tax rates, which affects labor incentives at the extensive margin and the intensive margin. Participation tax rate is if a person who are not working take a job and work, earn income. And whether your final income, your disposal income increases or not, that's the participation rate, participation tax rate. If your final income do not increase by working, then why do you work? So participation, sometimes you find from public assistance programs, participant tax rate is 100%, even higher than 100%, because you lose not just the official benefit, you lose other benefits that are accompanied by the official benefit. And the effective marginal tax rate, if you work one more hour, if you add your earned income, how much of your earned income is translated into your final income? If your effective marginal tax rate is 100%, then your final income does not increase. That is actually the case of many public assistance programs. So we want to reduce participation tax rate and effective marginal tax rate, so maintain them at a low level. That's the aim. And where is the clock? Already. So, and finally, individual level versus household level benefit provision. So social welfare, like Professor Seung-yoon Lee and me, we learned, so need-based provision. So needs, basic needs for a 4-member family are less than 4 times the basic needs for a single-member family. So for the poor population, you give higher benefits per person for smaller household size. So there is a marriage penalty and incentives for family breakup. And also, because this need-based benefit for provision, housing benefits in Korea for Seoul residents is more than double the housing benefits for the rural residents. So it at the time of risk of rural extinction, we have this kind of system. So basic income is based on everyone's equal right to commonwealth. So equal amount of benefit, whether regardless of a family household size and place of residence, which can promote marriage and household formation and living in rural areas. So this is the basic ideas of our book project, and we are eager to get your comments and questions and constructive feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have 8 discussants, as I mentioned early. I will just go through the names first, and when we'll start the discussion like this. In the order of how it's listed here. Is it okay, Jürgen? Yeah? Okay. And then we...
I have some basic some rather basic questions, so
Okay.
maybe I should go first.
Okay, then whoever wants to. Let me just introduce very briefly, although I'm sure all the participants know who the discussants are. We have Jürgen D. Wispelleri from University of Freiburg. I'm sorry for the pronunciation. And Troy Henderson from University of Sydney. Sumi Lee from University of La Verne. Annie Miller from UK Citizens Basic Income Trust. Guy Standing from SOAS. Philip Van Paris from University of Catholic de Louvain. Carl Wiederquist from Georgetown University, Qatar, and Almaz Zelake from NIU, Shanghai. So thank you very much for agreeing to be the discussant of this exciting book session. So I suggested we go around, but let's take hands first, and whoever wants to go first can go first. Yes, Carl, please.
Okay, thanks. I was one thing. One question I have is that it appears that you're writing this book initially in English. It doesn't appear to be a translation from Korean. Is that correct? You're writing it in English.
We are writing in the Korean and the English.
At the same time?
Almost at the same time.
Almost at the same time. Okay. I want to compliment you on your English. I found very few of those common errors you get for a Korean writing English. Very few of those. The English is very good. So you're creating an English and Korean version at the same time. So my first question is, why English initially? And what's the audience for the English book? Do you have a publisher for the English version of the book?
Do you want to maybe collect some, maybe?
Oh, I
two,
have a
three
bunch of questions that are all related to
Because
this.
I think one by one might be.
I think
Yes.
people are going to want to. I think
One
most
by
people are going to
one.
want to get me to get the conversation started before they get in. I could be wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
So, yeah. So actually, the publication of English book is a requirement.
Oh, really?
So funding requirement for, but anyway, we also found that we need to share our thinking based on our experiences in Korea. So it's our policy proposal for Korea. So, but also, so main audience is the people in policy community, as well as the graduate students and some undergraduate students who are interested in basic income. And so this is not intended to be a popular book for ordinary people. So at least
I can tell. Yeah, it's a very technical. For those, most of the audience hasn't read. It's a very technical book with a lot of equations and graphs and a very technical discussion of the politics and the economics of basic income. This is for, I would say, graduate students and professors and policy wonks.
Yeah, and some the senior undergraduate students
maybe
in
advanced
economics and the social welfare, social policy. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's our intention.
Okay, so I'll step aside here in my role of panelist to my role as book series editor. Do you have a publisher for the English language version? Because I am the editor of Palgrave's series Exploring the Basic Income Guarantee, and I can tell you that I could probably get Palgrave interested in publishing this. if you are interested.
Great, great.
Okay.
So I plan to approach you, and you are approaching me first.
Okay, great. So approach me later. Okay. So,
Let me go now.
oh, I've got more.
Okay, please
You
continue.
can go. Yeah.
And then we'll go.
Okay. So, I was also glad to see that, you know, the obviously with your discussion of promoting real freedom for all and the commons distribution. That's very much Philippe's argument for basic income, and Guy's and my perspective on basic income, and of course other people have argued along these lines too. It's great to, this isn't the first thing I've seen in the Korean context about common, not only the commons as a justification for basic income, but taxing land value, pollution, shared assets to support basic income. That idea seems, my impression since coming here in 2014 or whenever it was I first came here, that idea seems to have become very popular in the Korean basic income debate. And this is just a curiosity about the history of that. How did this idea get so popular in Korea? I'm very glad to see it. That's something that I'm very supportive. This commons tax link, commons ethical justification and commons tax link, both to basic income. How did that get so important in the Korean context?
Do you want to?
Mr. Professor
Or is that
Kang
not the
is
kind of question you
responsible.
want? If that's not the kind of question you want, we can skip that and go on. If we want to talk about more how to improve the book manuscript, you could skip that. It's up to you.
Or if anybody has a similar question, you can also merge that and then respond together. Maybe. Okay.
Oh, I'm not going to dominate the whole discussion like this. I'm going to run out of questions real fast. Yeah, don't worry. But I think I get the impression from talking to other people that they kind of need somebody to get the ball rolling. So that's what I'm trying to do.
강남훈 교수께서 한국말로 조금 얘기를 하면은 우리 사회자께서
그게 좋겠어.
네.
I will translate.
예.
이 한국은 조세저항은 너무 강한 나라고요. 일반적인 조세에서 한국은 조세 저항이 매우 강해서 이렇게 조세 부담률이 OECD 나라 중에서 제일 작은 나라입니다. 그런데다가 특히 이렇게 부동산에 대한 보유세가 너무 랜드 밸리 텍스가 너무 낮아가지고 부동산 가격이 GDP 대비 한 4배 이상이 되는 토지 가격이, 그래서 OECD에서 가장 높은 나라라서 이 투기 자산에 대한 어떤 불평등이 소득에 대한 불평등을 훨씬 능가하는 나라가 되었습니다. 그래서 이 자산, 이 토지라고 하는 것이 우리 모두의 공유부다라는 생각을 갖지 않으면 이러한 불평등을 해결하기 어렵겠다, 이렇게 판단해서 토지 가치세를 일찍이 주장을 했었고, 그것이 조금씩 받아들여지면서 부동산 투기가 워낙 심하니까 대통령 공약에 집어넣는 데까지 성공을 했었습니다. 물론 실현은 안 됐지만. 그런데다가 이제 또 탄소세 문제가 한국이 가장 심각한 지경에 이르러서 우리가 이 공유부 사상을 갖는 것이 이렇게 이 기본소득을 도입하는데 한국과 같은 나라에서 매우 지름길이다, 이렇게 생각하게 되었습니다.
Mm-hmm. So Korea is it's a country, Korea is a country with very high tax increase resistance. So for a long time, tax rate has been kept low. And also the land value itself is 4 times higher than the GDP, which which also contributes to wealth inequality. So Korea also has very high wealth inequality compared to income inequality. And so this has been a very big problem, especially around the inequality problem. So Professor Kang Nam-hoon himself and the community has been also suggesting actively to the presidential candidates about the land taxing. And this has been not adopted, but it did gained a lot of public attention. And at the same time, the carbon, the environment tax at the same time was gaining attention. So they believe that altogether, this kind of land taxing for the dividend of the commons would be the fastest way. And they have been suggesting this.
Yeah, that's great. The idea of commons taxes has been around for so long, but never really introduced anywhere. There's gotten close in Pittsburgh for a while, but and then they got rid of it. I think whatever country does this first is going to be a real model for the rest of the world when people see how well it works. Okay, now I have really one really big question, which I only got the manuscript late, and I don't know if many of you know it, but I have dyslexia, so I don't read very well. So I converted the manuscript into computer-read audio, and because of the shortness of the time, I sped it up. So I'm listening to somebody. We would like to combine the NIT and the UBI, and so I'm listening to it like that. And also, while I was unable to sleep with jet lag, I was walking around Seoul in the rain, listening to. We're going to combine UBI and NIT. So I did manage to get through. Now, one thing you can't do, there's a lot of graphs in this book. You can't convert graphs to computer-read audio. So I've not even glanced at a lot of the graphs. So I've been through the text, but not the graphs, so I'm behind on it. But it turns out, I think I've gotten through more of the manuscript than a lot of the pen, at least being able to do this. So now, in the time that we had, one of the major things in this book is this combination of NIT and UBI. Well, yeah, that's a little bit lesser stressed, but yeah, and it's actually a three-way combination. But the main thing is the main stress is UBI and NIT, and then also now I think one thing you're going to find within the UBI community, you're going to find a lot of skepticism that this is even possible, and there wasn't a lot of recognition that in the manuscript that anybody's going to be skeptical that this can be done, that there is a true combination of UBI and NIT. I'm probably less skeptical than some other members of this panel that is possible. However, when I was listening to this, read at this really rapid rate, and I did listen to the first chapter twice, but I got to admit, I do not understand how you're combining and even exactly what it means that you're combining UBI and NIT. I don't understand the combination. I don't know if you have like one component is a true UBI and another component is a true negative income tax, and you're putting the two together, or you're actually having a NIT that works a little more like a UBI. I don't understand the combination. Could you explain in maybe a simpler, easier way that we can all understand exactly how you're combining these two? That's what I really had most trouble understanding as I went through this manuscript.
Yeah, to this Amr, and then if you want to also
can you come back to me later then?
So I have a more general question before we get, if it leads into what Carl was talking about. I also find the manuscript very impressive, and commend you for all the work that you've done. I think that the question I have is whether this is really a policy proposal that you want to set out and recommend to the governments and to academics and elites, who might support it, or whether it's more of an educational project where you're explaining the possible kind of incremental ways that we could get to something like a basic income in Korea. Because that's what it seems like to me with the combination of these different particular policy programs, and yet it's kind of framed as a policy for Korea. So I would say that if it's really a policy proposal to the government, then my question is, what's the goal that you're trying to achieve? I think Annie was trying to get us to this in her talk yesterday or 2 days ago, I guess it was, right? That a basic income are really a cash transfer that is unconditional, or that might be unconditional, might be universal, might be individual. What's the third one, right? Individual. A particular kind of cash transfer is a useful policy tool in many different ways, right? For the carbon tax and dividend, very, very clear. I think we all understand that and accept that. For sharing the wealth from the Commonwealth, either land or oil revenues or that kind of thing. Very clear that we can use, a cash transfer in that way. But a basic income has the connotation that we're trying to do something bigger and more transformative. And that's where I see there's a little bit of a mismatch between that goal, the goal of a basic income in that big sense, and the goal of making incremental importance, but incremental improvements to the income security system in Korea through some form of cash transfer that bears some relationship to basic income, but not a complete relationship to basic income.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Philip, did you want to also add on that, or is it a separate question?
So my request is really that from an early stage, a restatement, a brief restatement of what you are actually proposing. So as I understood it, so you are in favor of a real basic income funded by a land tax or a carbon tax, which would be administered as a basic income, strictly individual and funded in a specific way, but of course very low. Okay, that's one. Two, you are in favor of what you call a universal EITC, which means that for all the people with earnings, you have a benefit that increases as their earnings increase, and then it reaches a plateau. And contrary to the EITC we know in the United States and elsewhere, then you don't have a phasing out range. And so from there on, it becomes a flat credit, a sort of flat wage subsidy, in fact, from there, and wage or earning subsidy somewhat more broadly. And then you have these two components, which are individual, and then you have what you call an NIT type basic income, which I understand as being something that's really administered as a negative income tax. So it takes into account the basic income funded through special means, takes into account the earnings tax credit, and then for the households that have not reached the guaranteed income, it provides this basic income. But it's not clear to me from the various formulations whether in the end you are in favor of an individual NIT type basic income or a household base, because you keep repeating in the text these strong arguments in favor of making it household based, namely the struggle against poverty and inequality, measured at the household level. And then you have the other argument, the fertility argument, the household dislocation argument that says, no, we should go for an individual one. And in the end, also from the examples you gave, it's not clear to me whether it's individual or a household. So my question to you, so that we have the background clear, is it correct, as I understand, that you have this real basic income, individual low with the special funding, then you have what you call a universal earnings income, tax credit, IT universal, which as I described, and then you have coming on top of that, and as a complement for that is very important for the low-income families, you have then an NIT type basic income, so administered as an NIT, and there it's not clear whether it's still individual like the other schemes or whether it's household based. So it would be useful for you to clarify.
So we because it's about the unclearness and also related to whether it's for policy suggestion or academic purpose. And then also Philip made it more clear which of the argument are you most focusing on.
Can I just add to the mix to say, you talk about a negative income tax, and I believe you're talking about the current benefit and taxation system, which I believe is household based, and rather it's actually an income tax benefit system, what we would call a means tested benefit system. So NIT is actually a misnomer because it implies just any benefit system combined with any tax system, but this is where you have the income tested benefit, which is really embedded within the tax system. And what I believe what you're trying to do is to have your land-based basic income at the bottom for everybody. You then have other individual-based benefits, which are not basic income because they are there's withdrawal on them. At first, I thought it was withdrawal on the gross income, but I gather it's actually withdrawal on the benefit. So it's not a basic income, cannot be called a basic income. And then in addition, you're having an extra a negative tax rate, which is your EITC, which is nothing to do with the benefits, purely to do with the tax system on, I've forgotten which layer of tax it's on. There's so many different levels of benefit and who gets them. It really is very complicated. So one of my own criticisms is that the benefit side of it may be relatively simple, but the tax rate is so complicated. I think it must be unnecessarily complicated, the way you've got negative rates, positive rates, parallel net incomes and so on. And I think it'd be, if we economists are finding it difficult to cope with, I imagine that the general public in Korea is going to find it even more difficult. So I would recommend that you do get it sorted and simplified in some way. Can I just say other things just now? I too have not been able to read the chapters you sent. I too am very dyslexic and very rarely read anything, but I have read chapter 6 in the 12-page supplement you sent initially, and I've studied that very carefully. And I want to say later that there's a lot of interesting things in your program. And so the things we mentioned are going to be we don't tend to say the good things, we tend to say the things that worry us. Can I say that the division between the treatment of workers and non-workers, I find very worrying because it's a discrimination. And one of the things about basic income is that we're trying to get rid of the discriminations. We're trying to get rid of the way we divide people into groups and treat one lot differently from other. And also I want to ask, who are the economically inactive? Now, we've already talked about disabled and the elderly, and you're going to with them. But the other people are people like people with chronic ill health, chronic mental ill health, people with personality disorders who are unemployable because no one will have them. It's going to include volunteer workers and people who are caregivers of children and disabled and people. But it's also going to be people who are thought of as free riders. And these are just people who have not been able to find work. And there's a reason for this. And I'd like to know what proportion of the adult population are these potential free riders. And I would suggest that if you have some people who've been so under-resourced, they haven't eaten for 3 days, would you expect them to go and work on the building site for 10 hours without having any food? Because that's really what you're saying to them. These people have not had enough income. They haven't got good health probably, and they can't do a day's work, and they are below the reservation wage. And here you are just piling it on and making them feel even worse. And so I would like you to think very carefully about why you are doing this. And if you can find a way of not discriminating between workers and non-workers and earnings and non-earnings, I think you would find a much more compassionate system that you're applying. I've got one other thing I want to say, but it's quite technical, and if there's time I should come back to it. And it's to do with the reservation wage and the way that basic income would help it, and also how the tax rates would affect it. So I'll come back to that later if there's time. Thank you.
Well, I think you wanted to add on this discussion, and there's a one round, and you want to respond right now. Okay.
So figures라고 했는데. 그냥 이걸 쓸게요. 여기서 여기도 figure가 다 있으니까. 자, 그러면은 아니 뭐라 해야 되는데 그냥 figures를 올려줄래요? figures 다큐멘트. 네. figures도 올려놨어요?
썼던 것 같아요.
여기 있구나. 됐어. 네.
그러면 이거 공유할까요?
네. So as I remember the questions,
Use the mic.
in the order of questions I memorize. First, what for? So we are aiming for 2027, the next presidential election. So before the presidential election, we want to educate the people, especially economists and social welfare scholars. So that's the first thing. And then policy community. And then we hope the best case scenario for the next presidential election will be the competition between universal basic income and the negative income tax. So the background information, let me briefly give you. The official position of the conservative ruling party, the People Power Party, is ironically in favor of basic income. They officially endorsed basic introduction of basic income in 2018 under the interim leadership of Kim Jong-un. Later, the party leadership and the President Yoon Suk-yeol abandoned it, but officially that still remains. And within the People Power Party, the mayor of Seoul, Oh Se-hoon, is promoting what he calls a safety income, a version of negative income tax on a household basis. And so he's running a 3-year experiment, randomized controlled trial. And the break-even point is 85% of family median income. And clawback rate is 50%. So the guarantee income level is 42.5% of median income, household median income. So compared to their program, our proposal is, our proposed level of a basic income or guaranteed income is much lower, and the clawback rate is much lower than there. And we expect the poverty reduction effect will be larger for that program, while inequality reduction effect will be larger for our program. And that program is on a household basis. Our program is on an individual basis. We compare the pros and cons between household and the individual. We make it clear we are basically basic income. By definition, we are basic income, and there are many reasons why we prefer basic income. So we do not deny, in terms of improving Gini coefficient and reducing poverty rates, negative income tax on a household basis will be more efficient, at least in the short run. Probably not necessarily in the long run, but at least the short run. But considering all things together, we favor individual level, and the better to start at a low to moderate level of basic income or guaranteed income than starting with a high level. And one thing is, I talked to the scholars who designed this safety income, I pointed out to him, we are not designing a program on a scratch. There are existing taxes and social security contributions. So 50% of global rate will translate into 85%, or even 90% if you add these kind of existing taxes and social insurance contributions. And he frankly said he didn't consider that. So he is now rethinking his proposal to reduce the global rates. So it will probably, there may be some convergence between the two rival proposals. And in Korea's political situation with extreme political polarization, outside of the kind of scholarly discussion, some civil political discussion is not likely. But I think some scholarly discussion should take place. And so I hope either Hoon or there are other proponents of a negative income tax, like Yoo Seung-min. He's proposing negative income tax on an individual basis. But he probably doesn't have much chance. Also may have some chance there. So if the next presidential election and inside in the Democratic Party, Lee Jae-myung, proponents of basic income, is now the leader of the party, but he has some political vulnerability. So it's unclear if he will rerun for presidency in the next election. We are not sure. He may well rerun, but anyway, whether he runs, whether other person runs, we hope basic income will be carried on. And one competitor to Lee Jae-myung is his successor as governor of Gyeonggi-do, Kim Dong-yeon. He's proposing opportunity income. He calls it a sort of participation income, but his idea is very unclear. So he has not made a concrete proposal other than opportunity income for artists, which was named basic income for artists before, whatever. And then probably Lee Won-jae, Mr. Lee Won-jae may say, can say something about opportunity income. And so this is the background. So how do you combine negative income tax and the basic income? What is the negative income tax type of basic income? So we have two levels of basic income or guaranteed income. So for the elderly and disabled, we give higher benefits. So it will be, and then for non-elderly, non-disabled, lower benefits. And then we have a same level of break-even point of income or threshold income. So clawback rates will be different. And then beyond, for the excess income, for income in excess of the threshold income, there will be 10% tax in addition to existing income tax. That's our basic proposal. And the break-even point is we propose 60% of GDP per capita, which is slightly higher than average personal income. But if we add capital gains, then the National Tax Service may be able capture 60% of per capita GDP as average personal income. That's different from the definition of personal income from the existing tax system. So existing tax system excludes exempted income and other things. So we propose dual system of income taxation. So existing taxes and then new basic income tax for people with income above the average income. In terms of comprehensive income, that includes capital gains and imputed rent. So this negative income tax type of basic income is actually very close to basic income with the taxes. But basic income, just the two levels of basic income for the elderly and non-elderly, for the disabled and the non-disabled, and two different rates of tax for those under the threshold income, and the same rate of tax for the excess income. And the universal income tax, the universal earned income tax rate is like that. Currently, tax reduction is like this. Tax reduction is like that. And replace it with that. So much more progressive. And but here, those people without earned income is excluded, unfortunately. So that's a compromise. But this is a stepping stone for the universal basic income. And we also propose this is a kind of participation income, which means labor market participation. For those people who are doing unpaid labor, we propose National Tax Service cannot accommodate them, but local governments, in collaboration with the local community organizations, we propose they arrange various participation activities, and they recognize care activities already people are doing unpaid work. So then at the local level, the supplementary universal earned income tax credit can be implemented, which will be close to universal basic income. That's our hope. And
네.
perhaps
조금만. 네. 오케이.
약간 너무 테크니컬한 거는
예. 그러니까 이제 그 세 가지 이 개혁을 집단을 설득하고 세 가지 조세를 기억하고 싶습니다. 하나는 공유부에 대해서 아무 세금도 내지 않고 부동산 투기를 하는 걸 세금을 걷어서 똑같이 나누자라는 제안이 이제 베이식 인컴이고요. 또 하나는 소득세를 개혁을 하자. 소득세에 기초한 기본소득을 지급하자. 근데 우리 전략이 똑같은 기본소득을 지급하고 10%의 소득세를 거두나 뭐 그걸 똑같은 개인 방식으로 NIT를 설계하나 같을 텐데, 근데 어떤 것이 더 설득하기 좋으냐를 고민하다가 보니까 마침 차기 대선에서는 상대방 보수당 후보가 NIT와 유사한 정책을 갖고 나온다면 우리가 그걸 가지고 설득을 한번 해보자라는 것이고요. 유니버설 EITC는 이렇게 좀 다른 것인데 한국에서 소득세 공제 제도가 있는데 너무너무 역진적입니다. 그래서 그 소득세 공제 제도를 몽땅 없애면 좋겠는데 그럼 근로자 전체가 반대하기 때문에 그거를 기본소득 재원으로 나눠주려고 고민하다 보니까 근로소득자들을 한테 걷어서 이렇게 기본소득 나누자 보니까 너무 작아서 그러면 너희들끼리 근로소득자 안에서 불평등이라도 좀 줄여보자 1단계로 그렇게 돼서 세 가지 집단을 각각 설득해야 되는데 어떤 집단이 먼저 설득될지 모르겠지만 제 생각에는 공유부 기본소득이 좀 가장 먼저 설득되지 않을까 그런 생각을 합니다.
Okay, we'll go very. I suggested we don't go too too much in detail about the technical matters, but I'll just briefly translate what Professor Kang Nam-hoon said, and then we'll go to the other 4 discussants, and then go the next round of the discussion. So they are focusing on basically redistribution of the 3 group, focusing on 3 topics. One is taxing the commons. So it's a commonwealth tax, basic income. Second is reforming the income tax. And so basic income NIT was a second suggestion, option, or another suggestion, because they thought about this because of the feasibility that the opposing party might also agree, because they also have similar policy idea. The third is universal EITC, and recognizing the limitations of this, but still trying to solve the inequality problem. How about inequality within the working people? So this is another suggestion, grouping working people, market income, and then taxing universal NITC was for that purpose. That was the response. Okay, now let's go to the.
I would just add this something really quickly. Well, to answer the Professor Panpira's questions, I think I did all the analytic parts, so I know the mechanisms, but all the components, NIT and UBI, University EITC, all are administered based on the individual units instead of family household units. So the reason you get the confused when you see the pictures and figures, it's because currently the NIT existing NIT systems are all administered on the household units. So we need to compare those with the existing systems. And also to answer briefly the Annie Miller's questions, we also think about the discrimination issues when we administer the UBI and NIT. And however, all the components are designed to give more benefits to disabled and old folks. So I think it will not completely solve the discrimination problems or the inequalities among the kind of income brackets. However, we can solve alleviate some income inequalities between the disabled and then other components of the population.
Okay, Troy, did you want to go? And then we go. Yeah. Go. And then, or you want to go? Let's go, Troy first, or you raise your hand first. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So my point is about universal earned tax credit thing. I only read the first 3 chapters and I read them very fast and for the obvious reasons. So perhaps some of that is better explained later on. But I still get very confused about how the universal EITC relates to this idea of participation income. Because on the one hand, it's very obvious that there's this link with earned income, and that's fine, right? So I get that part, but that's an earned income tax credit. So the expansion to participation income is a bit confusing, right? Because you talk about, fairness amongst workers and inequality amongst workers, but that part is just a separate part. You then have this little sort of almost like an add-on and say, okay, we're going to organize this in a community type of way, but there's a lot of worries with that, right? So the fact that this operates at a different level makes it politically very, very vulnerable. The fact that it's organized locally presumably means there's a lot of local discretion, which means you're going to have a lot of post-coast lottery, i.e. people will find themselves possibly being treated very differently depending whether they live in Seoul or one of the other cities. And again, politically, this can raise issues. I'm worried about issues around, what counts as participation. I mean, I was going to make my point to tag on to Annie's, because in some sense she captured some of this. There's issues around dignity and stigma, which you rightly flagged at various points as a criticism of the public assistance system. But actually, in a sense, you're smuggling it back into this participation income thing. So I really wonder whether, in a sense, it's a bit of having the cake and eating it. Like I get the political instinct of wanting to do the earned income tax credit. I get the point of wanting, your graph about making it more progressive. I get the sense of linking into the basic income sentiments of expanding, universalizing all that. But then the way this happens, I think you're running into a lot of tricky constraints, right? So I'm not quite sure that what you call participation income really captures what, especially Atkinson, for example. Heikki Hiilamo is you mentioned Heikki Hiilamo, so I've had big discussions with him about his book. He's a bit in a different category, but Atkinson for sure, I think, had something else in mind. And I'll say one more very, very brief point. One of the things that I found interesting is you make this special categorization around the age and the disabled. Now, age is easy, right? That's a very simple category, but the disabled is a very tricky category. So again, in a sense, and this comes back to Annie's point, and I haven't read chapter 6, so I don't know what's going on there, but I'm a bit worried about how fast you talk about a category like disabled without acknowledging that the stigmatization debate we have around poverty is absolutely the same when we think about disability. So I just wonder how that's going to work in your book, and whether, in a sense, perhaps you should tell us more about that.
Troy?
Thank you. Congrats on a very thought-provoking book. And I know we have another session on Saturday that's focused on empirical questions. So there was meant to be a more of a focus on the theoretical framework in this session. And I just had a question on that with your approach to reciprocity. So that criterion for you was satisfied based on a duty to pay taxes. Right, so the receipt of basic income would be satisfied on that criterion. And so I just wanted to clarify if it is correct, as Philippe was saying, that everyone, including those who have no market income at all, would receive in your scheme at least the Commonwealth dividend at some low level, but that being subject to tax satisfies your criterion of reciprocity.
It was a little difficult to go through, but I'm just going to give you impression that I have and some suggestions. I think it's impressive, and it's not just the academic purpose or educational purpose. I think it can be realized in Korea, in my opinion. It's really well thought out, and the first goal of a common dividend as a base, and then you build NIT on top of it. And then you really consider the realistic challenge about working population, right? The reciprocity question in Korea that is serious, to add another layer in the model. And so I think that you are considering, providing economic security for all the population in Korea, plus technical and political and cultural challenges. You anticipate that and incorporate in the model. So I think it's realistic, really realistic model. One thing I want to recommend is a little bit of simplicity that Annie mentioned. I'm an economist too, but our job is to elegantly simplify very complex idea and deliver it. So I know this is really technical. There are a lot of graphs and tables in this book, but the idea is excellent, I think, and it'll be refined and modified in the future with a lot of feedback. But I think the core, the fundamental idea is really solid and convincing to me. So I would suggest to kind of like start simple and add each component one by one for a separate chapter, and also some sort of like a chapter that is meant for the public. So in the first chapter, in the introduction, like easily understandable proposal without any technical details. And then you can go into the details later. So at least in one chapter, people without any economic knowledge can understand. And then I definitely think that be useful, at least the people who read that chapter. And another thing I want to mention is a commonwealth. Because Korea doesn't really have natural resources, right? And it's got a lot of people, but limited land, small land. I think Korea is small land, which is equivalent to the county that I am living close to. So it's really tiny land. So that's why the land value is extremely high, right? But you do have this land value tax, and also carbon dividend idea, and also like, some resources that you can share. But another thing I want to mention is Korea is really a country of development and redevelopment. So there are a lot of redevelopment all around the country. And I want to suggest a model to look into, which is called a tax-based sharing, which is in Minnesota. I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but basically the idea is it's in the Minnesota metropolitan area. It's a region like metropolitan area. And there are a lot of cities, different cities, right? So when your city developed a new commercial area, then usually this city will get all the benefits, right, from that redevelopment. But in that and then the poor cities, usually commercial development don't go to the poor area. So they don't get development. They don't get this wealth and profit from the commercial development in your city. But they go shop in your commercial area. So you get benefit from these poor folks. So their idea is that 40% of your redevelopment profit will be shared regionally. So I think that kind of idea, right? Seoul has really concentrated redevelopment and development, housing and what have you. And then you worry about these rural areas, right? Depopulation and so on and so forth. So I think that kind of, not just a common, like a natural resources, but also human development. The profit could be shared equally with everyone. So I'll stop here.
Yeah, just briefly, I highly object to the statement that Korea doesn't have much in the way of natural resources. Land is a natural resource. It is the most important resource we have, and Korea is extremely rich in valuable land. It is a resource-rich country when you take that into account. Well, those are natural resources, but so is land. And land is very important. It is extremely important, extremely valuable. It's 4 times GDP.
Iceland is one of the smallest islands and populations, and yet it's one of the wealthiest per head. And its only natural resources are fish and some hot water. So I think you're doing quite well.
You want to respond to it?
Sorry, you didn't translate why we propose universal EITC. Please translate my main argument. 그러니까 한국에서 EITC를 이렇게 제안하는 이유는 참여소득으로 설명하는 해야 될 것 같아요. 그런데 이유는 소득세 개혁, 그래서 소득 공제 제도라는 게 있는데 그게 너무너무 불평등이 심해서 부자들이 못 다가 그걸 없애고 싶었는데 그걸 없애고 그걸 전 국민 기본소득으로 나눠주려고 계산을 해보니까 비율은 제가 지금 생각이 잘 안 나지만 전체 근로자의 80%가 공제제도가 없어지면서 받았던 이익을 상실하는 것보다 기본소득을 받는 게 작다고 느껴지는 거예요. 그래서 소득세 그 소득세 개혁을 하기 위해서 그러면 그 공제제도 없앤 걸 원래 EIT 소득세 공제를 받던 근로자들 사이에서 한번 나눠본다면 80% 이상이
Okay, I did translate what you said, but very briefly. He agrees with Jürgen's idea that they should distinguish universal EITC with participatory income. We should be careful using the concept together. The purpose of universal EITC was when we're taxing the working population, almost 80% experience at the end of the day tax exemption. So from that exemption, the idea was gathering that resource and redistributing. At the end of the day, it's a redistribution within the working class. So it's a reforming of the taxing system on the working population. I mean, those workers who are earning in a very short, I mean, I didn't translate all, but briefly this was there. I'm very...
So it's really universal tax argument rather than universal tax within the work. Okay.
Workers who are generating income, earning income. Do you want, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No problem. I would like to propose that you have in your first chapter a vision of what you would expect from your model in 5 years' time, if it was introduced, so that you give the readers a sort of vision of a good Korean society. That's the first thing I do. The second thing, I think you need to separate the three parts of your argument much more than it's in the text. I haven't had time to read it thoroughly, so if I'm doing you injustice, please, I apologize in advance. But it appears that you've got all of the things together, and I would like to see them much more clearly separated. I personally, as an economist, am strongly against EITC. I find it close to the Spinamlum system. It's a system for driving down wages. It's the data in the United States shows that for every dollar spent on the EITC lowers real wages by 36%, 36 cents. So it has a depressing effect on wages, and it has other distortion effects in labor markets. So I have problems with the negative income tax, especially the very idea of shifting from a household basis to an individual basis. I don't like it as a household basis, but I can't quite see how it would work, right? It would have distortionary effects that I can't quite discuss at the moment. But I want to concentrate my remarks on the key theme, which I've used in my books, and particularly The Plunder of the Commons. And I like the point you make in chapter 2 on page 26, when you say you have an objective to reform a rent-seeking economy. I think 100% agreement. And that, I think, is where we should start in building the edifice of a commons basic income. But if you do that, you don't have to put all the weight on a land value tax. I support a land value tax. I think it's necessary, and I'm impressed by the Gini coefficient, this huge Gini coefficient of 0.8, which is very high, but we'll come to the empirical things because I think some problems with the data, but that's the second session, so I won't go into that. I think you can go into other forms in which the commons are taken, and where I've got 20 forms of, and that would reduce the weight you put on land. For example, and this doesn't, but it cuts in, when you say you haven't got natural resources, one of the things that I notice is you have a very high ratio of intellectual property rights. Okay? Korea has achieved a very high ratio of intellectual property rights. Intellectual property is pure rent seeking, right? Patents, copyrights, industrial brands, etc. And they are huge, huge sources for rent extraction, okay? And in the case of Korea, I think if you put more weight on that, I think the ordinary person would understand that, would understand the appeal of that. Why should a corporation get a monopoly profit for 20 years? Why? It's not right. So I think that, and one other point, I've got a lot of points, but I'd make one other point just for Sophia's benefit. I'll moderate. In chapter one of your chapters, you discuss briefly precarious workers. And I would urge you to read the book that's coming out on the precariat in Korea, because the definition that you give is woefully unnecessarily short. So I think you could revisit that subject.
Thank you very much. I think the last discussants' comments will be very useful for the authors, and we will end the session here, and because of the time limitation. So I want to thank all the participants, discussants, and the authors, and I really hope for the best of the success for the book also. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
오후 5시부터 1469에서 개별 세션 7 기본소득 불평등 빈곤이 진행됩니다. 다른 장소에서 진행되는 개별 세션은 각 장소별 안내